Well, welcome back to Hey Kentucky. We are fortunate to be joined today by attorney Todd McMurtry. Now, you may have heard his name because he is representing, in part, Nick Sandmann from Covington Catholic, and we all remember that situation is still ongoing. But we really have you in today because you are challenging Thomas Massie in Northern Kentucky in the GOP primary.
I know. It's an interesting transition to
Yes.
go from representing one of the most high-profile plaintiffs in the country to running for Congress. But I felt it was very important in the 4th District, Northern Kentucky area along the river, that we get new representation in Washington, D.C. So that's why I made that decision.
So what do you want to see done differently, I guess? What was really your impetus for wanting to run?
It's pretty simple. I know from my own research and just following Thomas Massie that he's not a friend of Republicans in the 4th District. You know, for example, he is a congressman, one of the 3 congressmen least likely to support President Trump with his votes. He pals around the state with Senator McConnell's primary opponents, and he's been listed as in Washington as one of the least effective congressmen. So if you don't support the president, if you don't support Leader McConnell, and if you're ineffective in your job, I think it's time that you find a new position.
So where do you politically differ from Massie?
Well, Thomas Massie's in essence a libertarian. I would consider myself a conservative Republican. I certainly strongly support the right to life. I strongly support the First Amendment and right to free expression. Strongly support the Second Amendment, right to own and bear firearms. I'm also a fiscal conservative, and those things are in common, but I think the real difference is that I plan to be much more effective. As an attorney in this area over the past 28 years, I've proven my capacity to be an advocate, to be a deal maker and negotiator, and to be a mediator, and those are skills that are very important. And based upon my opponent's record in the House of Representatives, he has proven beyond a doubt that he is ineffective, and I just plan to be much more effective than he.
So in this gubernatorial election most recently, Northern Kentucky voted for Andy Beshear. Is there a worry in your mind at all that it won't be either you or Thomas Massie that comes out of that district?
No, that's a great question, though. The reason I think that Andy Beshear was able to win Northern Kentucky is because, unlike Mr. Massie's predecessor, Congressman Jeff Davis had a very good and well-organized ground game in place in the 4th District, and that just basically died off under my opponent's lack of leadership. So if given the opportunity to be in Washington, I plan to establish or reestablish that ground game that Jeff Davis had.
So let me ask you this. If President Trump is not reelected, and you've spoken about Mr. Massie not supporting President Trump enough or vocally enough, how do you plan to be more effective?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, certainly that would be a changed circumstance, but I think it really comes down to, my personal abilities to be effective. For example, in Kentucky, there are 20,000 lawyers. Last year, I was listed as one of the top 50 lawyers in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. There are 535 members of the Senate and the House in Washington, D.C., and Thomas Massie's consistently ranked at the very bottom of that list. So just my own personal skill set is going to make me a far more effective legislator in Washington than he.
Did you ever think about starting with a statewide election versus going straight for Washington?
I thought the timing was just too good to pass up on this election. My opponent is uniquely vulnerable at this time, and I think that the way he's voted with regard to not voting with the president, not voting with the leadership in the House, he's just not a friend of conservatives in the 4th District. So I thought that the timing, we had to do it now because we really needed new and more effective representation. Somebody had to do it, and I decided to step up.
And what have you kind of heard from people, perhaps your future constituents up there?
I have been absolutely amazed at the outpouring of support. I mean, literally people contact me on Facebook, on Twitter, by email, by text message, congratulating me and thanking me. And I've met with, a lot of people in the first month of the campaign who are very happy to know that there's going to be competition. I think the district is really crying out for new leadership right now.
Would you be afraid to disagree with President Trump if you did disagree with him, or would it just be, are you just strictly partisan?
No, my view of how you get things done in Washington is in the House of Representatives, you're working with your teammates, okay? So what I would do is I would advocate very strongly for my position. So if it was something that I believed in, I would advocate for it. But if the leadership in the group of representatives decided that they wanted to go in a different direction, my inclination would be to support the team and move forward in a uniform manner. Now, obviously, there might be something like the Second Amendment or pro-life, which would be something I could never agree with, but I don't foresee that ever happening. I foresee that the Republicans would be consistent with my views on those key issues.
Do you foresee debates with Thomas Massie?
Be happy to. That's kind of what I do for a living, you know. So anybody that wants to debate me, you know, buckle up.
Well, thank you. Good luck to you. It's going to be a fast and furious next couple of months, I would imagine.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so
All right,
much.
Todd McMurtry, thank you. All right, much more Hey Kentucky right after this.